The Whispering Woods. There's a town you won't find on any map. Nestled deep within a thick, ancient forest, the place is known as Blackwood Hollow. The locals live in constant unease, their whispers filled with tales of the Whispering Woods, a stretch of dense, gnarled trees just outside the town. The woods are avoided, not because of wild animals or uneven terrain, but because of what's said to reside within. Voices, soft and beckoning, calling those who wander too close to their doom. It all began decades ago, though no one alive knows the true origin of the tales. Some say it started with a hermit who lived alone in the woods, a man driven mad by isolation. Others whisper about a witch who cursed the forest after being burned at the stake. Whatever the truth may be, the forest had taken on a life of its own, and those who entered rarely returned. Chapter 1. The Dare. 17-year-old Elise was not one to believe in ghost stories. To her, the tales of the Whispering Woods were nothing more than outdated superstitions, perpetuated by the older generation to scare kids into staying out of trouble. She prided herself on her rationality and had no patience for the town's eerie folklore. So, when her best friend Danny proposed a dare to spend the night in the woods, Elise laughed. "You're serious?" she asked, smirking. "Dead serious," Danny replied, his voice wavering slightly. "I'll even pay you $50 if you do it." "50? You're going to have to try harder than that," Elise teased. "Make it 100, and I'll stay until sunrise." Danny hesitated, glancing nervously at the woods visible in the distance. The sun was already setting, casting long shadows over the treetops. He'd never expected Elise to call his bluff, but now his pride was on the line.
"Fine.
100 it is," he said, holding out his hand. Elise shook it firmly, grabbing a flashlight and her backpack.
Piece of cake."
"See you at sunrise." Chapter 2. Into the Woods. Elise set off just as the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon. The forest loomed ahead, the trees standing like sentinels, their twisted branches reaching out like claws. A chill ran down her spine, but she brushed it off. It was just the cold night air, she told herself. The first hour was uneventful. She found a small clearing, spread out her blanket, and started scrolling through her phone to pass the time. The quiet was unsettling, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. She'd expected to hear owls or crickets, but the woods were eerily silent. Around midnight, the first whisper came. "Elise." Her head shot up, her heart racing. She swung her flashlight around, illuminating the trees, but saw nothing. "Danny, if this is you, it's not funny," she called, her voice steady despite the unease creeping over her. No answer. She sat back down, trying to convince herself it was just the wind. But then it came again, clearer this time. "Elise, come." The voice was soft, almost melodic, and undeniably female. It seemed to come from deeper within the woods. Against her better judgment, Elise stood up, her curiosity outweighing her fear. "Hello? Who's there?" she called, stepping cautiously toward the sound. The whispers grew louder, weaving together into a haunting harmony. "Come closer, Elise." Her flashlight flickered, then died, plunging her into darkness. Panic set in as she fumbled to replace the batteries. The voices continued, now surrounding her. "We've been waiting for you." Chapter 3. The Shadows. When Elise finally got her flashlight working, the beam illuminated a figure standing a few feet away. It was a woman, or at least it looked like one. Her skin was pale as moonlight, her hair flowing like a black river down her back. Her eyes, however, were what froze Elise in place. They were hollow, dark voids that seemed to pull her in. "Who are you?" Elise managed to stammer, taking a step back. The woman tilted her head, a slow, unnatural movement. "We are many," she said, her voice echoing as though spoken by countless mouths. "And you are ours." Before Elise could react, the woman dissolved into a swirling mist that shot past her, chilling her to the bone. The whispers erupted into a cacophony, each voice distinct, yet blending into an overwhelming symphony of terror. Elise ran, her flashlight bouncing wildly as she darted through the trees. She didn't know where she was going. She just needed to get away. The voices followed, growing louder, more insistent. Stay. Join us. Forever. Her foot caught on a root, sending her sprawling to the ground. The flashlight flew from her hand, rolling to a stop several feet away. In its beam, she saw them, shadowy figures emerging from the trees, their forms flickering like static. They had no faces, just blank, featureless heads that turned toward her in unison. Chapter 4. The Truth Revealed. Desperate, Elise scrambled to her feet and grabbed the flashlight, shining it at the figures. They recoiled slightly, their edges blurring, but they didn't disappear. "What do you want?" she screamed, tears streaming down her face. One of the figures stepped forward, its form solidifying into that of a young boy. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old. His eyes, unlike the others, were filled with sorrow. "Help us," he whispered. Elise hesitated, her fear momentarily eclipsed by confusion.
What?
The boy pointed to the ground beneath her feet. She looked down and saw that the earth was unnaturally dark, as though it were stained with something sinister. Images began to flood her mind. Villagers with torches, a woman tied to a stake, her screams drowned out by the crackle of flames. The curse. The whispering woods were cursed, and the spirits trapped within were its victims. "Break the circle," the boy said, his voice barely audible over the rising whispers.
How?
Elise asked, but the boy had already faded back into the shadows. The other figures closed in, their movements jerky and unnatural. Chapter 5. The Circle. Elise's mind raced as she pieced together what little she understood. The curse had to be tied to the clearing where she'd started, the only place in the woods that felt unnaturally still. She turned and ran, the shadows pursuing her, their whispers now a deafening roar. She reached the clearing just as the first light of dawn began to break through the trees. In the center, she saw it, a circle of stones, each one etched with strange symbols. The air around it shimmered, heavy with malevolence. Summoning every ounce of courage, Elise picked up a large rock and began smashing the stones. The first one shattered easily, and the whispers faltered. The shadows recoiled, their forms flickering like dying flames. One by one, she destroyed the stones, each impact accompanied by a surge of energy that sent shockwaves through the forest. By the time she reached the last stone, the shadows were screaming, their voices merging into a single, agonized wail. She raised the rock one final time and brought it down with all her strength. The stone cracked, and the air around her exploded with light. The shadows vanished, their screams silenced.